Have you ever seen a normally calm person completely lose it? What happened? One of my teachers in high school was the calmest dude. Never yelled, never told kids off, would just laugh and smile and wait for us all to calm down and then continue with his teaching. One day we must have been particularly rowdy and we weren't calming down like we usually did. He couldn't get a word in edgeways. I could see him getting increasingly frustrated and eventually he just bellowed, "Shut up." And the entire class was shocked into silence. He never had to do it again. It takes a lot to make my mom yell. On the rare occasion she did yell, it still felt like she had self-control. Like she yelled on purpose, because there was a reason to yell, like she needed to be that loud for us to hear us, or one of the kids needed to learn to never run into traffic again. But one morning when we were teenagers, my brother was being really difficult. And my very sweet, soft-spoken mother yelled "Goddamn it, Sean," and threw a butter knife down so hard it stuck, 1/4 inch deep, in oak hardwood floor. Against the grain. I can still hear the noise it made. We were all very well behaved for the rest of the day. I did eventually ask my mom why she did that. Her explanation was that she felt she was too angry to hold a knife, even a butter knife, and was trying to get it out of her hand before she did something stupid. I was chilling at a friend's house as a kid. His dad was the chillest, nicest guy. That day, my friend's mom, also super nice, was across the street talking to the neighbor about something that I can no longer recall. Neighbor was one of those guys who never respected common etiquette, music blaring, parking his poopty boat in front of other people's house, cars parked on the lawn. The neighbor started screaming at THR mom and we all went out on the stoop to see what was happening. As soon as we got outside, the guy called my friend's mom a cunt. Well, my friend's dad heard that and went full Hulk mode. He ran screaming across the street and just effing decked the guy and crouched over him shouting warnings and threats. Took a while for his wife to calm him down. I don't think any of them had ever seen him react to something in that way, maybe even the dad himself. I worked as a line cook with a chef who I became really good friends with. Really chill dude, easygoing, and actually super fun to cook with. He taught me most of what I know about cooking and I owe him a lot for my success. Never really saw him get mad until one day, we were getting slammed during busy night and one of the servers said something that really ticked him off, not sure if I ever heard what it was, but next thing I knew he had sent the deep fryer basket flying at Mach 1 across the kitchen, nearly missing the dish kit and shattering a light bulb. He stormed off and 5 minutes later after a smoke break, came back and casually continued cooking as if nothing had happened. He apologized about it the next day and we never talked about it again. The restaurant industry is a stressful place. When I was in my late teens I was financially irresponsible and borrowed money from my grandparents to move out of my mom's house. We made a plan on how I would pay it back in installments and I only missed 2 payments. With each one I called my granddad and asked if it was okay. He was always cool about it. One day I got a call from him and he was livid. Screaming at me on the phone and I could hear my grandmother crying in the background. He was the angriest I've ever heard anyone in my life and I was terrified. He wanted to know why I hadn't made the payment that month, but I was sure I had. It turns out I had accidentally set the automated payment to be drawn from the wrong account and it hadn't done it. It was an honest mistake on my part, and I explained that to him. I transferred the money immediately and he instantly calmed down. I later found out he had become an alcoholic after he quit smoking, and he would talk to my grandmother like that regularly when no one was around. It was really sad. I always loved my granddad and I continued to love him until the day he died. But that whole situation really shook me. I guess if we're looking for a silver lining, my grandmother called me the next day and told me about their problems. It brought me a lot closer to her and brought into perspective something I had never really thought about, that grandparents are people with flaws and dreams and that relationships aren't always what they seem at surface level. I used to see this woman in my building every day. Very friendly. We always checked on each other's lives. We had lunch a few times over the years. It was friendly to a certain degree. A couple years passed. She was much older than me. One day, riding the elevator, she told me that she was saying goodbye. I said I was sorry to see her go and asked why. She said she was retiring that day. I asked if her office was throwing a party or if she was celebrated. She turned to me and her face contorted into an image of rage. She clenched her teeth and said she didn't tell anyone in her office, including her bosses. She only told the HR person last week. This was her last day and she was never returning to see or talk to anyone in her office again. My husband works in a very hands-on clinic and has to be super calm and steady because he's poking needles in the joints, elbows and knees of squeamish patients all day. I was brought into emergency because my labor wasn't progressing, I was running a fever and baby was in distress. He knew an emergency C-section was the only way, but these two maternity nurses were just calmly chatting over my writhing form like it's tea time. He very calmly asked them twice to call for the anesthetist and get things going. But they knew he's always gentle and just nodded along without moving. More chatting. I was half stoned when I witnessed this. He slammed both palms on the side of the stretcher and said, "Is no one listening? Get the consultant in here." I was very proud of him that day. I had a friend who was in his 60s, a functioning alcoholic, but he was the most calm and composed guy I have ever known. He never used to raise his voice or swear. Everything was done with meticulous precision. He once explained to me that if you use vulgar language and shout all the time, then you will have nowhere to go when you really do get angry. I had worked with him for about 3 years, never heard him raise his voice or swear before. The week before he had been shafted on his pay and the manager promised to get it sorted by Friday. Friday rolled around and it had not been sorted. So when my friend walked up to the manager in the open office and declared loudly, "Where the F is my money? You promised this would be resolved." The whole office went silent and the look of dread on the manager's face was haunting. The money was in his account by the end of the day. That was him losing it. Growing up, my dad's best friend Leif was a quiet, shy guy that was a bit socially awkward. In school he wasn't physically bullied, but this one kid teased him constantly. This would have been late 50s, early 60s, so kids were expected to just tough it out. My dad would usually confront the kid, but one day a girl runs up to him and says that Leif and the kid are fighting. My dad runs over to save Leif, but when he breaks through the circle he finds the bully flat on his back, Leif sitting on his chest, holding him by the ears and smashing his head into the pavement over and over. My dad tackles him, wrestles him to the ground and screams at him, asking what he's doing. The thing that stayed with me from that story was how he described it. It was like there was nothing in there. I felt like I could see the back of his skull through his eyes. Luckily they were kids, so the damage was serious but limited. The bully escaped with stitches and a concussion, and Leif had to talk to the school psychologist. My dad and Leif stayed best friends, and when I met him as an adult he was still quiet but less shy and awkward. My dad is the most mild-mannered person I have ever met. He is the most composed, level-headed man I know. I once saw him trip in our garage and land in a bucket of nails and screws to realize he had one lodged into his kneecap. He looked over at me and said, "Don't tell your mom, she'll overreact," while he grabbed a pair of pliers and yanked out the screw. But when something happened to my special needs brother, he would get this sparkle in his eye that could scare a Navy SEAL. When I was 8 years old, my parents took my brother and me to eat at a restaurant, which was kind of a big deal because my brother was recently diagnosed with a degenerative physical health issue which was racking up huge medical debts, all while my dad lost his job after getting the bends on a work dive. We went to our favorite Mexican restaurant in town and parked in the handicapped spot nearest the front door. I still remember having an unusually light-hearted time in which I could see my parents' stress level subside and listen to funny stories about the past. We simply enjoyed a memorable dinner with lots of laughter. Looking back, I realized this was a big expense that my parents probably couldn't afford and sacrifice so we could have a normal night as a family. When we left the restaurant we found a car parked next to us, not in a parking spot but in the yellow stripes immediately next to our van. Normally this might not be an issue, but my brother is in a wheelchair and we had a folding ramp, not the hydraulic lifts that you see today, but a heavy metal powder-coated ramp. This was a Friday night, so traffic was crazy busy and my parents didn't feel comfortable just backing up into the street to load my brother, so my dad went into the restaurant to see if the manager could find the owner of the car and ask him to move. When my dad emerged from the restaurant I saw a look that I have never seen before. It was one of focus, determination, and rage. He looked at my mom and told her to get in the car. She just hopped in and said, "I'm okay," in a way that indicated she knew something might go down. He turned to me and said, "Watch this poop." He unfolded the ramp and slammed it on the roof of the car next to us. Then turned to explain that the manager told him, "I'm not responsible for what happens in the parking lot, why don't you just figure something out?" So he did. To be clear, there were maybe 4 to 5 groups eating in the restaurant. He could have easily asked someone to move. We waited for a minute and the manager came out yelling, "What are you doing? You can't do that." This was when my dad lost it. At this point he picked up my brother's wheelchair with him in it, which weighed about 150 to 200 pounds, and sat him on the hood of the car while yelling at the manager. He then jumped on the hood of the car and then picked my brother up to put him on the roof of the car, still giving the manager the business. He jumped up to the roof and calmly rolled my brother across the ramp and into our van, told me to get in and calmly told the manager, "I figured something out." Since that day I have never seen anything remotely close to the same level of anger from him. We laugh about the story from time to time and my dad is always quick to say that he overreacted, but I think he reacted just fine. We do believe that the car in question was the manager's because any customer could have seen what was happening from inside the restaurant, so we don't feel too bad. My dad never had to do this again because he had some incredibly bright orange stickers made that say, "You park like an asshole," that he kept on him at all times just in case someone needs to be reminded of what they are by placing it on their driver's side window. I had a master sergeant at one of my units in the army. Dude was half asleep most of the time. I don't think I ever heard him talk more than once. One day all the guys get called into the large classroom and he's in there looking upset. He launches into a rant about how easy it is to pee into the toilet instead of on the ground in front of it. Dude was passionate about where people pissed. Drew a stick figure diagram all angrily showing how you use one hand to stabilize and aim the pee into the toilet. I had to keep from laughing because he seemed like he was about to blow his lid. My mom. We had what we now refer to as the Jerry Springer Christmas when I was 7 or so. One aunt hated her sister-in-law and started screaming at her, then shoving started, husbands got involved, then it just continued to devolve from there. My mom went straight into mediator mode and tried to calm everyone down, but it wasn't working. She decided to come check on us kids and found my cousin and me holding each other and sobbing because we were scared. The next thing I hear is her scary mom voice screaming over everyone, "Listen here you motherfrickers. My kid is in there crying on Christmas because her family can't keep their poop together for the one day a year we all see each other. You're gonna march your asses into that room single file and apologize to each kid individually, then you're going to shut the hell up until I get them out of here. We're going to go find lights to look at and this family better be the picture of goddamn Christmas joy by the time we get back." My mom never really cussed in front of me and only ever used to when things were really bad. That side of the family didn't celebrate Christmas for a few years after that. Mine was my high school history teacher. Dude was great, always cool and collected. Really one of the best teachers I've ever had. He also happened to be a former Green Beret, U.S. Army Special Forces. One day we were in class and all us kids were being rowdy, obnoxious, and not paying attention in the least. All it took was him snapping with a, "Shut the hell up," for the entire room to go silent. He went right back to teaching, but there's still some heavy tension in the air. After a few minutes he apologized for losing his temper, but someone in our group collectively apologized for us and told him it was totally our fault. Only time I've ever seen a room full of teenagers humbled like that. Had a friend I've known since we were kids. This event happened when him, myself, and 2 other friends were roommates and 21 to 22 years old. We will call him Kevin. He was always happy-go-lucky, always smiling. The guy you call at 3 a.m. with a flat tire and he just asks where you're at. Never one to start anything, always managing to diffuse any situation with a smile, an offer of friendship, and a beer. While we on the other hand seemed to be in a bar fight every weekend. While Kevin would always be there to break it up. Regularly getting hit, but never swinging back. He isn't a big dude, 5 feet 9 inches-ish, maybe a bit overweight, but worked in labor-intensive jobs at his family business since he was young, so he was deceptively strong. Normally when breaking up fights he would just pick people up and set them down behind him. Something about being picked up by the biceps and just moved without violence or malice seemed to always take the fight out of people. It was like his superpower. Anyway, we had a party at our house. This was an every weekend thing at the time. We were all outside sitting around a bonfire. A friend of a friend we will call Steve was being a dick. Getting in people's face, saying he was gonna kick so-and-so's ass, and we generally ignored him. He was drunk and it was kind of his normal behavior, nobody took him seriously. He got in Kevin's face screaming at him, because he was sitting next to his ex-girlfriend. Kevin let it slide, again he never gets angry or confrontational. At this point Steve has his forehead against Kevin's, just screaming. I guess something just snapped in Kevin. Without any warning or words Kevin picked Steve up by the throat and slammed him into the ground. At which point Kevin started to just beat the snot out of him, never letting go of his death grip on Steve's throat. All of us were frozen for a second. This was the first time we had ever seen Kevin be violent. We quickly snapped out of it and ran to get them apart, but we found out that wasn't going to be easy. It took 2 guys pulling Steve's legs, another 2 pulling Kevin's, and a final guy pulling Kevin's hand from Steve's throat. This entire event probably only lasted 20 seconds, but Kevin never stopped swinging. Once they were apart Kevin snapped out of it and began apologizing to everyone including Steve. Kevin even went and got a wet rag and ice pack for Steve. Kevin kept apologizing to everyone the rest of the night for ruining the party. We told him he didn't, besides we got in fights all the time, just don't worry about it. After that night I've only seen Kevin snap once more. A guy sucker punched our friend in a bar while we were just talking on the patio. Guy ended up with a handprint on his throat and 2 black eyes. It again took several people to pull him off. Our always smiling Kevin has a genuinely frightening side when he stops smiling. My first semester in college I was in a math class with a horrible teacher. The entire class hated him. The girl that sat in front of me was very sweet and soft-spoken. One day, I don't remember what set her off, but she just snapped and started screaming at him. It caused such a commotion that someone called security to check if everything was okay. The teacher quickly dismissed security and went back to teaching like nothing had happened. I've noticed this with people who are aware they're assholes. When people call them out on it/lose their poop, they try to sweep it under the rug, move on as quickly as possible and pretend nothing happened. My boss does this. I'm very chill, but every once in a while he pushes me over the edge and I tell him off. He often won't even respond or make eye contact and then pretends like it never happened a few minutes later. If they acknowledge it, then they'd have to apologize and that it hurt their pride too much. During my previous, pre-pandemic job, I worked with a really talented, super nice manager named James who was a total professional and very good with customers. He's one of those guys you look at and from sheer physical size you'd think he could easily be a bouncer, but he's just an absolute teddy bear of a human being. Didn't matter what changes came down from the top of the company or how business was going, dude just soldiered on as a beacon of positivity. Never got visibly mad or upset, he was pure Teflon to bad news. But one day I get a call from a janitorial service we contracted with to do a lot of the deeper cleaning at our facility. During this call they asked me to confirm that we have 2 day shifts and 1 overnight shift cleaning our building. I don't know why this came up, exactly, but it was puzzling since we only ever had 1 day cleaning shift and 1 overnight cleaning shift, and this had been the case ever since I began working at that particular location, probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years by this point. They kept insisting that I must be mistaken and that surely there was a second shift during the day that I was just missing. However, I was the guy who had to regularly review their work and submit this feedback to the contracted company, so I was 100% certain that we only ever had the 1 day shift. Eventually, I put them on hold and informed James of this, and like a switch the dude completely changed his attitude. Gone was the James who always had a smile on his face and never let anything get to him. In his place arrived a stone-faced mountain of a man who asked me to let him talk to these people. I give him the phone, he goes into his office, and I watch through the window as he becomes increasingly animated, maybe even to the point of outright yelling, as the truth comes out that we had been being charged for this second daytime janitorial shift that had never actually existed. Was like watching a teddy bear turn into a grizzly in the span of 3 minutes. Dude was able to move past it and return to his normal self after the call, but while he was on it I could tell he was just incensed by the fact we were being billed for services we weren't actually receiving. One time in high school, a couple bullies were up in this other kid's face. Dude was just sitting there like Anton Chigurh or Private Pile, no expression and staring straight ahead, clearly not hearing a thing. One of the bullies inched closer, and the kid decked him as hard as he could in the face. The bully was knocked to the floor, speechless with his nose bleeding everywhere. The kid then calmly stood up, still with no emotion, calmly packed his things, and made his own way to the principal's office as if nothing at all had happened. It's still one of the most brutal things I've ever seen. It was like right out of a movie.